Welcome to another edition of Revealing the Diamond. We're here from Edmonton, Alberta for the Bloom Festival with some incredible teachers like Guru Jagat, Danielle Laporte, Ryan Lear, and many others. And it's been a real blessing to be here. And I'm actually recording this podcast from one of my dearest friends, Andrew Measley, to pronounce it correctly. I'm always teasing him about how people mispronounce his name, and then I mispronounce his name because I'm so used to teasing. Oh well, good thing he's of Chilean descent, and so their sense of humor is really all about teasing. But I'm here in his meditation room and sharing some thoughts with you on Restoring the Balance, Resistance as Teacher, which is the name of this particular podcast, and it's a big theme that's been showing up in my courses. And just one last little heads up or advertisement before we go ahead with the content, and that is I'll be doing a weekend one of the Aquarian Luminosity training that we offer, and it's going to happen in Calgary on October 18th to 20th. So if you live in the Bow Valley, or you live in Edmonton and you're attending Bloom, or you live in Calgary itself or somewhere in the surrounding area, I recommend coming out for that. It's a 3-day training. It's happening at Yoga Passage. And if you'd like more information about any of that, you can email me at Tiaga, Tiaga, Prem, Prem, at thedharmatemple.com. All right, I think that takes care of the promo materials, and you can also always direct message me on Instagram if you have any questions, etc. So what we want to talk about today is restoring the balance, resistance as teacher. We've seen some pretty intense things happen. I think it's pretty interesting that my mom was in Vegas when this horrible terrorism, awful act of violence and pain and suffering that we saw take place there. I also arrived in Edmonton right after the events that happened here, and it got me to thinking quite a lot about my yoga practice over the years and questions that come up around pain and suffering. I've sure learned a lot from listening to teachers like Ram Dass when it comes to the pain and the suffering, and also from Kundalini Yoga, all yoga in general, Buddhist teachings, and I just feel like when I show up to teach lately, it hasn't necessarily been in my notes, but this theme that keeps coming through is this concept of resistance as the teacher. And so I thought I would take a little time here from my day before I go and hang out with Guru Jagat and take her class this evening at Bloom, and lay this out for you guys so you can tune into it in your car, or if you're on Instagram watching, that's awesome, or whether you're listening on your headphones or whatever it is, wherever you listen to these podcasts. So basically the big part of this for the understanding to begin is that we live in a realm of duality. You know, there's good, bad, right, wrong, love, fear, whatever you may see, but these world of opposites, these pairs of opposites are happening all around us. And generally, you know, we are taught to work really hard and then we'll get a reward, and putting all of this emphasis towards effort. And hopefully, if you say your prayers, maybe your parents told you that, maybe not, you won't suffer too much along the way, which is sort of an absurd way of looking at it, because we know, even just looking at nature, take away the emotionalism, that there is always a pair of opposites. Something doesn't exist by itself. It needs to have an opposite to reflect it. And it's the same with spiritual truths. Like most spiritual truths that are really profound are a paradox. You know, that's why something like Zen is so enticing to us. But when we started putting in as humanity, our emphasis in you only want to be in heaven and don't go to hell, it creates a big imbalance, when actually what we need to do is acknowledge all of it. And if we're able to acknowledge it, we'll be able to create a healthier relationship with suffering. And I'll explain it a little bit more as we go through the talk. So what this has created in our society is this need for us to be right and somebody to be wrong. Draw a line in the sand, a die for the flag mentality, which has caused, as we all know, a lot of pain and suffering. Religion has caused a lot of division. Patriarchy, which comes, or patriotism, which comes from the word patriarchy. It means to serve the king. That hasn't worked either because that's imbalanced. You need to serve the divine masculine and the sacred feminine. When you only serve one, it creates imbalance. And we've seen this over and over again. And the big imbalance that we're experiencing in these times is the addiction to pleasure and the fear of pain. I just want to feel good. It's all about me. Or we see a lot of talk about privilege coming up during these times. And privilege means that just because it doesn't affect me and my life, that means it doesn't exist, which is another imbalance. It's denying the world of duality, and the yogi or the sage doesn't do this, because the yogi or the sage recognizes that buying into this game of two-dimensional living creates imbalance. And the imbalance isn't a punishment, it's actually the teacher. We call it the Saturn teacher. The teacher showing up and saying, hey, this isn't how it works. Let me restore the balance for you. You know, if I say, for example, as somebody who is in recovery, let's say that I'm having some tough times in my life and I'm tired of feeling like that, and so I start to drink to pretend that the issue isn't there. Well, if I do that at the beginning, I'll start to get little signs that say, this is taking you away from you, maybe you should make some shifts. And if I ignore it for long enough, and it repeats and repeats and repeats, resistance will come up and give me a nice smack in the face and remind me that that's out of balance. And resistance is probably the best teacher that there is. And the idea with these practices that we do is to catch the lessons from resistance before they become these huge catastrophic events. And that's how we're designed. It's the way that we are. And so ultimately the sage is learning to acknowledge that yes, there is pain, yes, there is suffering, and I'm all of it. And then carry yourself through the world with that understanding, and then relate to others with that same understanding. The problem with I only want to feel good, I only want to feel good, I only want to feel good is if that goes on long enough and you're denying that there isn't any feeling bad, you may take advantage of others just so that you feel good or benefit. And that's not going to work. Or you have an experience with pain when you're in this place of I'm only supposed to feel good, and then something that isn't really that big of a deal becomes a horrible, awful mess, and every time it happens, it becomes a neuroses, and it's repeated and repeated and repeated, and then we get into things like, depression, and that can even come from the addiction to pleasure. And then the flip side of that is that if we go through, we're a realist sort of person, and why does this always happen to me, and the world is a dark and evil place, or whatever it might be. And we've seen this happen in religion. People have been manipulated by being scared into, well, as long as you follow these rules and give this money and behave in this way, then you won't go to the dark place. And the fact is that there is darkness, and there is the amount of darkness that we experience ultimately is defined on how much resistance we need to correct the balance. Think about if the earth had no humans. The earth would continue to correct the balance over and over and over again. There would be sun when there needed to be sun. There would be rain when there needed to be rain. The earth would shift and move. There would be natural disasters. There would be complete beauty. There would be all of these things going on. And there would be nobody there to judge it. And the interesting thing about us as humans, and I couldn't really say why we have to go through this process, in the grand scheme of the cosmic map of life. I mean, who knows? Is there a God? Is there no God? I mean, it really doesn't matter that much. It really matters is that you look at what's going on around you with a deeper eye than your, I want to be happy, I don't want to be this, I want to be that, I don't want to be, this whole head trip of the two dimensions. So you pay attention that you are part of the earth that is constantly correcting itself. And then when you recognize that, you can see that there are things in your life showing up to correct you as well. And the biggest thing, I don't know about you, but the biggest thing in my life that has worked as an effective teacher is resistance. And the times when I've been in the most pain and suffering is the times when I'm not listening to the resistance. I've decided that I'm going to go against nature. And I think I spoke about it in a previous podcast. It's sometimes challenging to remember when I'm in the classroom and when I'm in the podcast and when I'm talking to a student one-on-one and when I'm talking to my partner and when it all sort of runs together. But there are these concepts in yoga called Purusha and Prakriti, and Purusha is the creator. It means consciousness. It isn't something outside of you. It's not, God, the man with the gray beard sitting on a throne in the sky. It isn't that. It's consciousness. It's the best version of yourself. It's the teacher. I like the teacher. I think, people can manage the word teacher better than God, and it's you. It's not outside of you. It's all around you. Another good way to describe it is the enlightenment principle, which is always operating around you, but it's very subtle. And then the dense part of the equation of life on this planet as a human being is Prakriti, which is nature, which is the stuff that I'm saying is always moving and shifting. It's the ground. It's the sky, it's the water. The thing that makes it nature is that it is going to always change. That is the characteristic that defines something as nature. And so if you look at yourself, you know that your skin is going to change, your face is going to change, your body's going to age, your organs are going to change, and then eventually your body is going to become a different shape of earth. But even beyond the surface of that, your thoughts, are they changing? Yes, they're always changing. Your thoughts are part of nature. Your emotions, are they changing? Yes, they're always changing. They're part of nature. Your personality, now you're getting a little closer to Purusha, the creator, the teacher, the true version of yourself. But is your personality changing? Yes, your personality is changing. I don't have the same personality as I did when I was 7. It's very similar. Part of it stays the same, the true self. The other part of it is just related to all of this. And the way that natural order works is that the creator, which is you, the teacher, the best version of you, your consciousness, the most valuable resource on the planet Earth, it is constantly commanding Prakriti, or acknowledging the way Prakriti moves and knowing who they are in relationship to nature. And when we forget who we are in relationship to nature, and if you're uncertain about who you are, you can use this analogy. It works every time. What is the value of a child at birth? Unlimited. There's no way you can put a price on it. They are infinite worth. They don't have any negative thoughts or self-doubt. They just are who they are. And then as they begin to pass through their karmas, their experiences, they begin to forget about that infinite worth that they're born with, which we're going to call Purusha, or consciousness, or Purka. And I have a mental block here, Gurmukhi. So what happens is when we start to forget, because of the karmas, who we are in relationship to our conditions, the conditions attempt to define us. And when nature tries to define consciousness, something happens. It's in the natural order, and what it is resistance. It's saying, that's not who you are consciousness, you're not nature. And sometimes, if we let that lesson go on for long enough, the resistance shows up as a really intense teacher. And now this whole process happens on an individual level. It also happens on a collective level. So that means that if you're ignoring resistance showing up as teacher in your life, it gets more severe, it gets heavier to manage, and it isn't bad, it's actually your missteps leading you to consciousness. But you have a choice in the matter. You can catch the lesson at the whisper, you can catch the lesson at a regular voice volume, you can catch the lesson as resistance screaming and yelling at you, or you can catch the lesson with a swift smack in the head from resistance. That's the Saturn teacher. That's what is notifying you and reminding you that you are consciousness. You are not all of this shifting and changing. That consciousness is inside of all of this shifting and changing. But the more we recognize that, the less there's these swings in the polarity of pleasure, pain. You see it all. It's all happening. It's all part of nature, and you see who you are in relationship to that. And then that also happens on a collective level. If we all walk around saying, I'm addicted to pleasure, pain, don't get near me, pain, don't get near me, pain, don't get near me, and then people start to fall believing that there's only one or the other, privilege on the pleasure side and poverty on the pain side, and then we can't see a way out of it, all this stuff like depression comes up, there's no point to live, there's nothing that I can do, I'm defined by my circumstances on this side, and then on the other side, it's like I'm separate from these other people, I can't really connect or have empathy for anyone, I'm just looking out for number one, greed and all of that sort of behavior on this side. What's going to happen when we have these extremes going on both ends is resistance is going to rise up and correct the imbalance. And it's intense, and it's up to us. We are the masters. You people who take the time to listen to these recordings, who take the time to study with all of the amazing teachers who understand this, who take the time to teach about this, you are the ones who need to be the lighthouse and remind people of the resistance, that we are going to experience all of this because we are all of this, and we're going to get the lesson at a whisper. And in order to get there, there's going to be some corrections, and those corrections are happening to restore the balance. That's how Earth works. It's an incredible thing, you know. I love the Taoist thought that this is the way. It is this and it isn't this. That's how it operates. We can't hold on to it and grasp it and it only be one way. It's constantly moving and changing. However, there is a part of you that is able, through the practice of meditation, to recognize the polarity, the duality as it's happening, and then see who you are in relationship to it so that your conditions don't define you. And when you're able to see this way, resistance corrections will not be so intense. I hope that makes sense. If you have questions about this at all, I just wanted to give you a quick little blurb about this. I think it's incredibly important to understand this teaching during these times, and I probably will share more about this in the future, but for now we'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to this mini episode of Revealing the Diamond. I hope to see you. I will be in Calgary sharing the Aquarian Luminosity course October 18th to 20th. I will also be going to Canmore next weekend, which I guess would be the, let's do the math here, 14th, I believe. It's a Saturday. Anyhow, you could check out the Yoga Lounge in Canmore's website. I'll be teaching there. And I'll also be teaching at Junction 9 on October 22nd on living a life of true prosperity. So that's about it for now, guys. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. Please review it on iTunes and tell your friends about this. Those of you who are interested in doing further study with me, you can also check out what we're up to on thedharmatemple.com. Thank you again. Love you all. Sat Nam.